The revenge that changed everything. In 2019, a software engineer named Marcus Chen walked into his former office building in San Francisco with a single USB drive in his pocket. What happened in the next 48 hours would destroy a billion-dollar company, ruin dozens of lives, and land him in federal prison for 11 years. But here's what the news didn't tell you. Marcus wasn't the villain in this story. He was the victim. And his revenge? It exposed one of the most elaborate corporate conspiracies in Silicon Valley history. This is the true story of how far one man went to get even, and why sometimes revenge doesn't just hurt the person who seeks it. Let's rewind to 2016. Marcus Chen was living what most people would call the American dream. He was 34 years old, a senior developer at TechFlow Industries, pulling in $280,000 a year, with stock options that were about to make him a millionaire when the company went public. He had a fiancée, Sarah, a wedding planned for the summer, and a down payment ready for a house in Palo Alto. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Marcus had been with TechFlow for 7 years. He'd helped build their flagship product from the ground up, a data security platform that Fortune 500 companies were lining up to buy. His code was the backbone of the entire system. But Marcus had noticed something strange in the months leading up to the IPO. Late-night meetings he wasn't invited to. Whispered conversations that stopped when he entered the room. His access to certain servers mysteriously restricted. When he asked his boss, David Kellerman, about it, he was told not to worry. Just IPO jitters, David said. You know how it is. Marcus trusted him. They'd been friends for years. That trust would be his biggest mistake. Because on March 15, 2017, 3 months before the IPO, Marcus was called into an emergency meeting with HR. He was being terminated. Effective immediately. The reason? Gross misconduct. Theft of proprietary code. Sharing trade secrets with competitors. Marcus was stunned. None of it was true. But when he tried to defend himself, they presented emails, chat logs, file transfers, all with his credentials, all apparently showing he'd been selling company secrets for months. How is this possible? He kept asking. I didn't do any of this. Security escorted him from the building. His badge was deactivated. His laptop confiscated. And just like that, 7 years of his life evaporated. But it got worse. Within 24 hours, Marcus's entire world collapsed. Sarah called off the engagement. She'd received an anonymous email with evidence of Marcus having an affair, complete with fabricated photos and messages. She wouldn't even let him explain. His professional network turned on him. LinkedIn connections removed him. Former colleagues blocked his number. In the tech world, word travels fast, and the word was that Marcus Chen was toxic. The house they were supposed to buy? Gone. His savings? Draining fast as legal bills piled up because TechFlow wasn't just firing him, they were suing him for $4.5 million in damages. And the worst part? Marcus couldn't prove his innocence. Every piece of digital evidence pointed to him. Someone had meticulously framed him, and they'd done it using his own code, his own access, his own digital fingerprints. For 6 months, Marcus spiraled. He couldn't get another job. He maxed out his credit cards. He moved into a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. Depression hit hard. There were nights he didn't think he'd make it. But then, on a cold October evening, something changed. Marcus was going through old backup drives, trying to piece together what had happened, when he found something. A log file he'd forgotten about. A personal script he'd written years ago that tracked unusual access patterns on his workstation. And there it was. On February 28, 2 weeks before he was fired, someone had remotely accessed his computer at 3:47 a.m. His computer had been at his apartment, turned off. But according to the logs, someone with admin privileges had cloned his entire session, his credentials, everything. The IP address traced back to TechFlow's office. Marcus's hands were shaking as he dug deeper. He found more hidden partitions on his old drives, encrypted files he'd backed up without realizing. And slowly, piece by piece, he uncovered the truth. David Kellerman, his friend, his mentor, had orchestrated everything. Why? Because Marcus's code was too good. When TechFlow went public, David stood to make $40 million from his equity. But the board wanted to renegotiate Marcus's stock options, giving him a larger share because of his contributions. David couldn't let that happen. So he framed Marcus, stole his work, and prepared to take sole credit when the company went public. Now Marcus had a choice. He could take his evidence to the authorities, try to clear his name through official channels, hope the system worked. Or he could make David feel exactly what he'd felt. The betrayal. The loss. The complete destruction of everything he'd built. Marcus chose revenge. And he spent the next 18 months planning something that would make David's betrayal look like child's play. What Marcus Chan planned wasn't illegal. Not technically. Not at first. See, when TechFlow fired him, they'd made a critical mistake. In their rush to get him out, they'd forgotten that Marcus had built backdoors into his own code, not for malicious purposes, but for debugging. Legitimate access points that only he knew about. And those backdoors were still active in TechFlow's system. Marcus started small. He began documenting everything. He accessed internal files, emails, financial records. Not to steal them, but to preserve them. Because what he found was so much bigger than his own firing. TechFlow's security platform, the one they were selling to Fortune 500 companies? It had massive vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that David knew about but had hidden from clients. Vulnerabilities that could expose millions of people's personal data. Marcus found emails where David explicitly told engineers to bury security reports. Messages where he coached the sales team to lie to clients about encryption standards. Financial documents showing kickbacks from vendors for inferior components. TechFlow wasn't just a successful startup. It was a house of cards built on fraud. And David Kellerman was at the center of all of it. But Marcus didn't go to the SEC. He didn't call the FBI. Because he knew how these things worked. Whistleblowers get crushed. The system protects the powerful. So Marcus decided to do something different. He was going to expose everything, but in a way that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be buried, couldn't be spun by expensive lawyers and PR firms. He was going to let TechFlow destroy itself. On June 3, 2019, the day before TechFlow's IPO, Marcus executed his plan. Using his backdoor access, he didn't delete files or plant malware. He didn't crash servers or lock anyone out. Instead, he did something far more devastating. He made everything transparent. At 9 a.m., every internal email at TechFlow became visible to every employee. The pay disparities. The racist and sexist messages from executives. The lies told to investors. Everything. At 10:30 a.m., all the hidden security reports automatically sent to TechFlow's major clients. Companies like Bank of America and Kaiser Permanente discovered they'd been lied to about the safety of their data. At 12:15 p.m., the SEC received an anonymous package containing evidence of financial fraud, securities violations, and false statements in TechFlow's IPO documents. By 2 p.m., the IPO was cancelled. By 5 p.m., David Kellerman had been escorted from the building by federal agents. By the end of the week, TechFlow had lost 90% of its clients and was facing multiple federal investigations. Marcus had done it. He'd gotten his revenge. David's life was in ruins. His reputation destroyed. His fortune gone. Everything Marcus had experienced, David was now living. But revenge is never clean. And Marcus was about to learn that the hardest way possible. Here's what they don't tell you about revenge: even when you're right, even when justice is on your side, the system doesn't always see it that way. Within a week of TechFlow's collapse, federal investigators traced the data breach back to Marcus. Yes, he'd exposed fraud. Yes, he'd revealed genuine crimes. But he'd also accessed a computer system without authorization. He'd used credentials that were no longer his. He'd, technically, committed computer fraud. The FBI arrested Marcus on June 18, 2019. The charges? Unauthorized access to a protected computer, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Combined, they carried a maximum sentence of 25 years. Marcus's public defender told him to take a plea deal. "You broke the law," she said. "Even if your reasons were good, you still broke it." But here's where the story gets complicated, because the public didn't see it that way. When news broke about why Marcus had hacked TechFlow, social media exploded. Hashtags like #FreeMarcusChan and #WhistleBlowerNotCriminal trended for weeks. Cybersecurity experts called him a hero. Privacy advocates rallied to his defense. The companies whose data Marcus had protected? They publicly thanked him. One CEO said, "Marcus Chen saved us from a catastrophic breach. He should get a medal, not a prison sentence." But David Kellerman, facing his own criminal charges, had expensive lawyers. And those lawyers had a strategy: make Marcus look like a vindictive hacker, not a wronged employee. They painted him as someone who'd been bitter about being fired, who'd manufactured evidence of fraud, who'd destroyed a company out of spite. They argued that Marcus's backdoors were actually unauthorized access points he'd created to steal from TechFlow later. The narrative shifted. The trial lasted 3 months. Prosecutors acknowledged that TechFlow had committed fraud. They acknowledged that Marcus had been wrongfully terminated. They even acknowledged that his actions had prevented potential data breaches. But, they argued, vigilante justice isn't justice. Marcus could have gone to the authorities. He could have worked through official channels. Instead, he took the law into his own hands. "We cannot live in a society," the prosecutor said in closing arguments, "where people get to decide for themselves when breaking the law is justified. That's not justice. That's chaos." The jury deliberated for 4 days. They found Marcus guilty on 2 counts, unauthorized computer access and wire fraud. Not guilty on identity theft, which was something. At his sentencing hearing, the judge spoke directly to Marcus. "Mr. Chen, I believe you were wronged. I believe TechFlow committed serious crimes. I believe your intentions were, in your mind, noble. But I also believe you made a choice to pursue revenge instead of justice, and that choice has consequences. Not just for you, but for everyone who looks at this case and thinks they can take the law into their own hands." Marcus Chen was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. David Kellerman? He took a plea deal. He served 18 months in minimum security, paid a $2 million fine, and was banned from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. 18 months versus 11 years. But here's the thing about revenge stories. They don't end with the verdict. Because while Marcus sat in prison, something unexpected happened. In 2021, 2 years into Marcus's sentence, a young journalist named Alicia Rodriguez got a tip. Someone had sent her documents. Lots of documents. Emails, financial records, testimony transcripts from the TechFlow investigation. But also something else, evidence that David Kellerman's legal team had suppressed during Marcus's trial. It turned out that David hadn't just framed Marcus. He'd done it before. Twice. 2 other employees, in 2014 and 2015, had been mysteriously fired for misconduct right before major milestones that would have entitled them to significant bonuses or equity. Both had been silenced with non-disclosure agreements and settlement payments. Marcus wasn't David's victim. He was just the one who'd fought back. Alicia published her investigation in December 2021. The response was immediate. Legal experts called for Marcus's sentence to be reviewed. Tech industry leaders demanded pardons. Even politicians got involved. But the wheels of justice move slowly. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in prison, and something strange happened. He started coding again. The prison had a computer lab for education, and Marcus began teaching other inmates programming. He helped several earn certifications. One guy he mentored landed a job at a tech startup upon release. Marcus told a prison visitor in 2022, "I thought revenge would make me whole again. It didn't. It just made me like the people who hurt me. The only thing that's helped is trying to build something good, even here." In August 2023, Marcus's sentence was commuted by presidential clemency. He'd served 4 years. He was released with time served and 3 years supervised parole. David Kellerman, by then, had moved to Florida, was consulting for tech companies under a different name, and had largely rebuilt his life. So who won? That's the question everyone asks. Did Marcus get his revenge? Did justice prevail? The answer is complicated. TechFlow never recovered. The company was liquidated, and the technology Marcus built ended up in the public domain, used by open-source security projects that have protected millions of people. David Kellerman avoided serious prison time, but his name is poison in Silicon Valley. He'll never have power in the tech world again. Marcus lost 4 years of his life, his career, his relationship with Sarah, and carries a felony conviction. But he also became an inadvertent icon for whistleblower reform and corporate accountability. 3 states have passed laws since 2021 protecting employees who expose fraud, inspired partly by Marcus's case. When Marcus gave his first public interview after his release, the interviewer asked, "Do you regret it? Would you do it differently?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "I regret how I did it," he said. "I wish I'd been smarter, more careful. I wish I'd understood the price I'd pay. But exposing what David did? No. I don't regret that. My mistake wasn't seeking justice. It was thinking revenge and justice were the same thing. They're not." Marcus Chen today works as a cybersecurity consultant, specializing in helping companies implement ethical whistleblower programs. He speaks at conferences about the fine line between justice and revenge. David Kellerman has never publicly commented on the case. And somewhere in Silicon Valley, in offices just like the one where this all started, there are people right now facing the same choice Marcus faced. The choice between right and revenge. The choice between justice and vengeance. The question is, what would you choose? If this story affected you, if you've experienced workplace retaliation or corporate fraud, resources are listed in the description below. And remember, revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but justice is what actually changes things. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.